the introduction, which I don't want to say a lot about, other than that the Exeter book that the two poems we'll be discussing first today is a manuscript, and it's called the Exeter book because it's held and has been since the early 11th century at Exeter Cathedral. Okay? And it's kind of an interesting collection because it has a wide variety of Anglo-Saxon verse. It's got not only the Wanderer and the Seafarer, the two things we'll focus on for the next hour or so, but it's got several other elegies. It's got quite a bit of religious verse. You could say that the Wanderer and the Exeter may not be religious verse, but then it also has all of the known surviving Old English riddles, and there are about 100 of them. Okay, that range from the silly, let's say, to the almost pornographic. Okay, and it's thought by many, I won't say most scholars, but it's thought by many scholars that the Exeter book was probably or may have been written for and by monks. Okay, so you got to kind of have to hold in your mind, okay, you got this religious verse, but then at the same time, you got some of this really dirty verse. Or, if not really dirty and possibly pornographic, at least riddles that have a lot of double entendre and a lot of innuendo, okay, which I don't believe, none of the riddles are included in our book. So we're going to take a look at the Wanderer and the Seafarer, and even though I said yesterday we'll, in terms of revising the syllabus, I'll never add things. I might add one today before we start Beowulf, assuming we finish the Wanderer and the Seafarer. And the one I might add is the Wife's Lament, which is the next one in the book after the Seafarer, because it's a beautiful little poem, but nobody really knows what it means. Okay, and we'll talk about that possibly. But let's look at the Wanderer, and I'll give you an idea of usually how I always go about teaching poetry is I'll read an awful lot of it, so get used to that. Always the one alone longs for mercy, the Maker's mildness. Though troubled in mind, across the ocean ways he has long been forced to stir with his hands the frost-cold sea and walk in exile's paths. Weird is fully fixed. Okay. Now, the guy who translated this, his name is Roy Liuzza. He's professor at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. He's done also a translation of Beowulf from the Old English to Modern English for Broadview Press. And he's done all of the Old English material that is in the Broadview books. I say all that to just emphasize he's a really good translator. In fact, I think his translation of Beowulf is about the best one available. And that's even including Seamus Heaney's. Seamus Heaney, Nobel Prize winning poet from Northern Ireland. But, and this gets back to what we were talking about yesterday with Bede and Bede's comments about translation. A translation never does justice to the original. Roy translates into this modern English. Always the one alone longs for mercy, the Maker's mildness. Though troubled in mind across the ocean ways, he has long been forced to stir with his hands the the frost-cold sea, walk in exile's path. Weird is fully fixed. Okay, the word he translates longs in Old English, and I might put this up on the screen. In Old English is Yebedeth. In fact, I will put it up on the screen so you can see all this. Projector. Yebedeth, right there. Okay? Often, him, alone, or the solitary one. Ra is the word that means, or that Leusa translates as mercy. Okay? It can mean mercy. It can also mean favor. It can mean grace. Okay? But this word, Yebedeth, is the one I want to focus on for a moment. Because it doesn't only mean longs. And this is where, when you get into things like translating, how you translate a word substantially affects how you interpret what it is you're translating. Because Yebedeth can mean longs or awaits for. We get a modern word that comes from this. This. Okay. What's right in the middle of it?
Bide.
To bide. To bide your time. Okay? So, what does it mean when you say to bide your time? We don't use it very much. Okay? Waits. It also means expects. Now, there's a big difference between longing for something and expecting something. I've been told I'll get a raise. I am longing for that. Whether or not it comes through is an expectation. Okay? You can long for something and yet never receive it, right? You can expect something, but you haven't yet received it. Okay? Back to the poem. Always the one alone longs for mercy, the Maker's mildness, Metuda's milza. Okay? Though troubled in mind, across the ocean ways, he has long been forced to stir with his hands the frost-cold sea. The reason he's stirring with his hands is because the kind of vessel he's in, word that's usually used to describe it, is a coracle. It is a very small boat. It's not even like a kayak. It isn't like a kayak in that it can fit one person. But it's a small kind of leaf-shaped boat that one person can sit in and use his hands or her hands to move in. To stir with his hands the frost-cold sea and walk in, where is it? Right here. And walk in Raklastas, exile's path, or paths. That second half of that word, lastas, if you know anything about shoes, the way a shoe is shaped, the sole is called the last, depending upon how curved it is and things like that. Rack is the word for wretched or exile. So when somebody today says that they feel wretched, if you take that word in its literal etymological meaning, that is, you take it all the way back, it means you feel like an exile. Like you have no home. You have nobody that you belong to. No communal group. Okay? You have to unpack the words to get what they really mean. Okay? And then you get this weird bithful arad. Move that cursor. Weird bithful arad. Weird. Notice he doesn't translate that. Okay? All you have is a gloss. A powerful but not quite personified force. Closest parallel in modern English is fate. Notice, that's the closest, but that's not it. We think of fate, if you're going to be really fatalistic, as something that cannot be changed or altered whatsoever. We think of fate in kind of the Sophoclean sense, the Oedipus sense. He tries to outrun his fate, and he runs right into it. Okay? Weird is a little bit different, because Beowulf is going to tell us, when we get to Beowulf, that you can modify weird, that weird will work. with an individual to some extent. Okay? It's related to the verb werthon, meaning roughly to occur or to happen. Its meanings range from a neutral event to a prescribed destiny to a personified godlike fate. It's useful to think of weird as what happens, usually in a negative sense. Now, what does he mean? He means what happens in the sense of the bumper sticker. Exactly. Shit happens. Okay? You could replace that first word with weird. Weird, you want to show how truly nerdy, Old English, Anglo-Saxon you are, make up a bumper sticker that says weird happens. And one of a million people will get the little joke. Okay? So we get this opening, and we're told in the next stanza, it's not really stanzaic in Old English, we're told that this is spoken by the wanderer. Okay? Notice the wanderer, not merely what we have up here, the solitary one. This guy isn't just sitting, boom, still as a stone, alone. He's moving. Okay? That's significant. So, thus spoke the wanderer, mindful of troubles, of cruel slaughters, and the fall of dear kinsmen. So, whoever is speaking now, whoever this narrator is, the narrator's just told us what is going on in the wanderer's mind. Okay? He is mindful. That is, his mind is full of troubles. Okay? So said this is what gets translated as wanderer. Erd stappa. Erd, earth, stappa, stepper. So said the earth stepper, the walker, in other words. Okay? Mind, okay? Mindful of troubles, okay? Of wrath. See the word wrath in there? Wrathful or hateful, slaughters, etc. Okay? And the fall of dear kinsmen. So, whoever this wanderer is, he is remembering the past. And his mind is full of problems, slaughters, the fall of dear kinsmen. And then we get, in Leuse's translation, quotation marks. In other words, somebody's now speaking again. Often alone, every first light of dawn, I have lamented my sorrows. So you get speaker up here, then narrator talking about the speaker, and then the speaker again. Okay, in the Old English manuscript, there are not quotation marks. Quotation marks don't exist until about 1550 or so. As marks of punctuation, they don't exist at all. Okay, this is a modern editorial invention. Because we assume that the person saying, often I alone had to, is this person. So, often alone, every first light of dawn, I have lamented my sorrows. In other words, what does he do when he wakes up?
He thinks about it.
Yeah. It's like he opens his eyes and it's like, oh no, not another day.
The blues song. Got up this morning
And
my sorrows in this world.
yeah, or a bad country music, song. He wakes up and she's still done ripped out his heart and stomped that sucker flat. Okay? Because what governs his life? Where is he?
Alone.
Alone. And treading the path of exile. He has no country. He has no home. He has no society. You're going to see how important this is to Anglo-Saxon literature as we move through this, the Seafarer, probably the Wife's Lament, and then Beowulf. There is no one living to whom I would dare to reveal clearly my heart's thoughts. Notice he doesn't say, there is no one living to whom I can reveal his thoughts. He says there's no one to whom I will. So there's something about keeping his innermost thoughts hidden, keeping them under control. Well, he's going to tell us what it is about those thoughts. I know it is true that it is in the lordly nature of a nobleman to closely bind his spirit's coffer. What in the text is called right here. I know in truth that it is in a nobleman, okay, to bind fast, to hold his hoard coven. Hoard, modern English, H-O-A-R-D, coffin. Okay? That is the secret place that he binds up. What do you hoard? Generally. Treasure. You don't hoard, garbage, unless you're, some weird cat lady, who has 8,000 animals. No, you hoard things you really want to keep close to. In fact, we even have a phrase today, keeping something close to the vest. Okay? That probably goes back to this old English image of keeping things close in the chest. Okay? So he says, it's in the nature of a gentleman, a nobleman, to what? To keep his problems sealed up. To hold his treasure hoard, whatever he may think. Kind of like, if you're familiar with Hamlet. Anybody in here familiar with Hamlet? Okay, you know where I'm going? What? Where? Where am I going with this? I referred to Hamlet. He's talking here about keeping your ideas, keeping your thoughts close to yourself. How is that similar to Hamlet? To thine own self be true. What does Polonius tell his son? Don't give your voice to a quarrel, but give your ear to every man's censure. In other words, keep your advice to yourself. Why is that so significant in the play? Because Polonius doesn't keep his own advice. He is not true to himself, and that's why he dies. Okay? The weary mind cannot withstand weird. Why the weary mind? What does weary mean? You see the word right there. Okay? Weary. That's exactly, well, in Old English it's weary. Weary. Okay? Weary. Tired. Worn out. So why can't a tired and worn out mind withstand weird? What does the word withstand mean? To endure. Notice it means exact opposite of to stand with. Okay? Here's why. That word with in Old English, it looks like that. It means against. So in Old English, if you stand with someone, you stand against them. You are opposed to them. And so battles are so-and-so with so-and-so. Beowulf with Grendel. Okay? That's what we still mean with the word withstand. I withstood somebody's negative comments. Meaning, I stood against them. I stood up and I didn't faint. I didn't falter. I didn't, give in, etc. So the weary man can't stand against weird. Why? Stay up for 36 hours and try to stand against anything.
It's just too much. He's just too damn tired.
You're just too damn tired, exactly. When I went to school in Chattanooga, while at the same time living, not literally at the same time, but living in California, I would have to drive back and forth, at the end of semesters and stuff. I would do that nonstop. I mean, I'd stop for gas and such, but I wouldn't stop to sleep. That's if I was able to make it fast and not get stopped by a cop, like I had happen once in Sedona, Arizona. I could do that in 36 hours. Usually it's more like 39 hours. Okay, 39 hours not sleeping. By the time I would get there, I'd be so jacked up on no-dos and caffeine and Coke, that everything, made me jitter. But he's saying, if your mind is worn out, you can't take what comes at you. The troubled heart can offer no help. Okay? Against weird. Again, look at the translation or the gloss for weird. Against what? Whatever happens. And so, that is, therefore, if these two first premises are correct, that the weary mind can't withstand weird, and the troubled heart can't give you any help, therefore, those eager for fame, those who want to earn a lasting reputation, often bind fast in their breast coffers. The word is breast coven, right there. Okay? They bind fast in their breast coffers a sorrowing soul. And you have here what I argue in all the classes I teach, where I teach this poem. You have here the quintessential character of the native Brit, or the native Englishman. We refer to it today as the stiff upper lip. Why is that upper lip stiff? Because it's not quivering about to cry. When I was in London, giving a personal anecdotal example. When I was in London in July of 2007, I was teaching my Harry Potter course, which I do every other year. I'll be doing it next summer. The day we flew over, big group of us, about 200 people. The day we flew over was July 7th, 2007? Yeah, July 7th, 2007. Which, if you remember, was the day of the London Tube bombings. I'm in bed, get a phone call, 6 o'clock in the morning. Don't usually get phone calls then. And I'm like, what is this? It's like, Ted, don't worry. We're probably going, who is this? And what are you talking about? You don't know? Know what? Turn on the news. Turned on the news, find out, London is in an uproar. Well, we arrived the next morning. Our flight leaves like at 8:30 that night. We arrived the next morning. In London is like you've never seen London before. For example, you get off the plane and you walk through, I think we were going through Gatwick. You walk through Gatwick and you see armed policemen. British police aren't usually armed other than with a stick. Okay? These guys aren't just armed. They are heavily armed. They are wearing bulletproof vests. They are walking around with AK-47s and their fingers on the trigger guard. And they are walking four abreast. So when they're walking, people are like, get out of their way. Okay? You get down into central London, out on the streets, and the cops are doing that. You look up on top of the buildings and you see snipers. Okay? But what you don't see And what you don't hear and what you don't read in the newspapers is, oh, why did this happen to us? What have we done? Who have we offended? It's, these dirty rat bastards think they're going to intimidate us. We lived through the Blitz. We survived Hitler's bombing. This isn't going to stop us. And little old ladies, okay? I mean, just walking around, getting ready to flip the bird to everybody because they were mad that anybody would have the gumption to do this, okay? So, line 19. Just as I've had to take my own heart, okay, keep in mind, he referred to the breast coffer earlier. I've had to take my own heart, often wretched, cut off from my homeland. Winter said, over the ice-locked waves. Gives you an idea, we're not talking about somebody out in the boat in the middle of the Caribbean or in the middle of the Mediterranean. Where are we talking? Either, because it's an Anglo-Saxon poem, either probably the North Sea or the North Atlantic, neither of which are known for being warm, and both of which do have ice flows during the winter. Okay? Just as I, what? Ever since long ago, I hid my gold-giving friend. His gold, Mina Goldwina, gold friend. Who's his gold-giving friend?
Lord.
His Lord. Because it is part and parcel of being an Anglo-Saxon lord or chieftain is the giving of treasure. See, there was this social compact, let's say, between an Anglo-Saxon lord or chieftain and his thanes or his soldiers or warriors. His soldiers, warriors go out and fight battles. He would lead them in those battles. Okay? And in return, the Lord would give gifts for their service. These gifts take a variety of forms. It could be, maybe you don't do a lot. You get a cup. Maybe you do an awful lot. You get a sword. Most warriors did not have swords. Swords were high value items. Okay? Or you get an arm ring, which was very significant. Or you get a neck ring, which is even more significant. Okay? He's saying, I had to bury my Lord. I hid my gold-giving friend in the darkness of earth and went wretched, again, winter sad, over the ice-locked waves, sought, hull sick. Hull sick. How can you be hull sick? I mean, I can understand with peck hull. But he's talking about, an Anglo-Saxon hull. He means sick for want of a hull. He doesn't have a hull. Okay? You have to understand, in an Anglo-Saxon society or culture or community, you have the hall, and the hall is the locus of community life. It's the center. Everything that's important happens in the hall. When the Lord dispenses treasure, it happens in the hall. When the Lord announces or pronounces judgment, it happens in the hall. Okay? If there is a great communal feast, it happens in the hall. So the hall becomes symbolic, let's say, of culture itself, of the civilization, the community itself. So if one lacks a hall, one lacks a home. Even though his or her own little personal hovel might be out here. If this is destroyed and the Lord is killed, everything falls apart until a new Lord is appointed. But he's not talking about a new Lord being appointed because what has happened. He's already told us what's happened to his kinsmen. They're all dead. So why is this guy the only one alive? We don't know. Weird.
Tough luck.
Yeah, tough luck, good luck. We don't know. So what has he done? Because his Lord has been killed and he no longer has a hall to call home, he says, I left what was home. And he's gone out over the seas. To do what? Sought a treasure giver. He's looking for a new Lord. But he's looking for a Lord who, wherever I might find, near or far, someone in a mead hall who knew of my people. He's going out trying to find somebody else who is aware of his community, of his tribe, and somebody who remembers his Lord. That will be the connection that he needs. Or who would want to comfort me, friendless, accustom me to joy. He's looking for somebody under whom he can take protection. Okay? Because to be alone, to be solitary, to be in exile in Anglo-Saxon society was really not to exist. Okay? It means your life has no worth. That's not a peculiar idea to the Anglo-Saxons, by the way. The ancient Greeks felt the exact same way. If you're familiar with the story of Socrates, why does Socrates drink the hemlock?
Because he's cast out. Or he can accept exile, but to accept exile is worse than to die.
Exactly. Plato and the others bribe the guard and they say, Socrates, we can get you out of Athens. And Socrates says, there is no out of Athens. There is no life out of Athens. Okay? The polis, Greek word for city, was everything to the Greeks. What existed outside the city? The barbars, the barbarians, those who didn't speak their language, etc. So he says, I want to find someone who will comfort me, who will accustom me to joy. That is, someone who will replace my sadness, my weary heart, my troubled mind with joy. He who has come to know how cruel a companion is sorrow, to one who has few dear protectors will understand. So, who is the old man, the wanderer, speaking to? Others who have been in the same boat as he is. Look at how he says that again. He who has come to know how cruel a companion is sorrow to one who has few dear protectors will understand. So, if you haven't come to know how cruel a companion's sorrow is to one who has few dear protectors, what should be protecting him other than a Lord? His mind? His heart? Very capable, right? Against weird. He has no protectors, he says. Someone who understands this, or someone who has experienced this, will understand. And then he makes it clear what that individual will understand. That the path of exile claims him. It's not that he claims the path of exile. It's that he becomes bound with. His identity becomes tied to the path of exile. Not patterned gold. And patterned here can have a variety of meanings. It can mean twisted or wound, as in gold that is used to make a bracelet or an arm ring. It can mean patterned, as in as in that. This is a piece of solid gold. It's about this big, about that thick. It's a belt buckle. Okay? But look at you can't see it very well because of the optics in this room. This is where you have one of these lines. This is called interlaced structure. This is actually one line that just keeps going. There aren't, 4 or 5 ends. There are 2 ends, beginning and end. And it just weaves all throughout. Again, you can't see it well on this because of this crappy projection system. But there's inlaid in here little dark pieces of gemstone. Okay?
There's a picture in the book.
Yeah, I know, but that one's not very good either because it's too dark. If I had the cable to go from my computer to this thing, I could show you pictures I've taken, which are 100 times better than that. But it gives you an idea of patterned gold. Not patterned gold. A winter-bound spirit, not wealth of the earth. Notice, the path of exile claims him. Go down to the next line. A winter-bound spirit. Notice how the 2 lines are ordered. A path of exile claims him, not patterned gold. A winter-bound spirit, not wealth of the earth. All this guy has is suffering. Right? He remembers. Who's the he? The person who understands. The person who has lived in my shoes. He remembers hall holders and treasure taking. Hall holders. Those are the things of the Lord. Okay? And treasure taking. He doesn't mean literal going out and taking. He means the receiving of treasure. How in his youth his gold-giving Lord accustomed him to the feast. Accustomed. What does it mean to be accustomed? I'm not accustomed to feasting. He's meaning someone who has enjoyed feasts so regularly that they're habitual. Okay? That joy has all faded. That is not my life anymore. To one who understands, he understands that joy no longer exists. And so, in other words, therefore, he who has long been forced to forego his dear Lord's beloved words of counsel will understand. He who has long, or has for a long time, not heard his beloved Lord's words of advice, he will understand. He's going to understand something. What he's going to understand, back over here, that when sorrow and sleep both together often bind up the wretched exile, it seems in his mind that he clasps and kisses his Lord of men. Okay? When sorrow and sleep bind up the wretched exile, what does he do? What does the wretched exile, the person all alone, longing for a Lord but not having one, longing for sleep but not really getting good, deep sleep, what does he start to do?
See stuff.
He sees things. He hallucinates. It seems in his mind that he clasps and kisses his Lord of men. And on his knee he lays hands and head. Why? Because this is an ancient image. Laying your hands or head on your Lord's knee. I mean, if you want, you can take it all the way back to the Old Testament book of Genesis. Okay? When you lay your hand or head on somebody's knee, that is a sign of supplication. That is a sign of begging for mercy. as he sometimes long ago in earlier days enjoyed the gift throne. Your gloss says, gift throne. Description seems to be of some sort of ceremony of loyalty, charged with intense regret and longing. Okay? The gift throne, the Old English word is Gifstol. Yeah, right there. Gifstol. Another spelling for it is just like this. Gift stool. It's the throne. It's the throne, the seat that the Lord sits in as he dispenses gifts. Okay? It's going to be an important word when we look at the early part of Beowulf. But then he wakes up. And what does he see? Waves. Waves upon waves. Seabirds bathing, spreading their feathers, frost falling and snow mingled with hail. So what has he really seen? He's seen these birds, and he's projected these memories onto the birds. Then the heart's wounds are that much heavier, longing for his loved one. How many of you have ever awakened from a dream only to realize, no, because the dream wasn't real? Sorrow is renewed. Sorg bith yenuad. Sorrow is renewed. Then, when the memory of kinsmen flies through the mind. Okay. Sorrow is reawakened. He had a little bit of peace when he was asleep. When he had this vision, this dream of being with his Lord again. And he wakes up and all he sees are these blankety-blank birds on the ocean. And he realizes, I'm all alone. And the memory of kinsmen flies through his mind. He greets them with great joy, greedily surveys hall companions, and they always swim away. They swim away? How do memories swim away? They don't, unless they're the birds sitting on the ocean. And they swim away. So what's going on with this guy's mind? Man, he's losing it. Okay? He is really losing it. And the floating spirits bring too few well-known voices. Why are the spirits floating? Because they swim and then they fly away. And he hears the cries of the birds. The next poem is going to emphasize the sound of the cries of the birds. And so I cannot imagine for all this world why my spirit should not grow dark when I think through all this life of men, how they suddenly gave up the hall floor, mighty young retainers. Now, many scholars take this middle section of the poem to be almost, let's call it, a 10th century, 9th century existentialist, angst-ridden appeal. That here's a 9th or 10th century Anglo-Saxon feeling fully the existentialist angst of a Jean-Paul Sartre or Albert Camus writing in the 1950s or so. Just feeling deep in his bones, there is no meaning to life. We are born, we live, we die, and life sucks. And that's it. Not what's going on, however. Okay? You have to look at this middle section of the poem and how it relates to the beginning and how it relates to the end. Okay? So, notice what he says. I can't imagine for all this world why I shouldn't be depressed. Why my spirit should not grow dark. When I consider what? The life of men. What is the life of men? How they suddenly gave up the hall floor. Mighty young retainers. Now, that's a metaphor, folks. What does it mean they gave up the hall floor? They died. It means they were swept away, the mighty young retainers. Why the mighty young retainers? Why not the old? It's fitting that old people should die, right? That's what we expect. We don't expect men in their 20s or women in their 20s to die, or babies, or children. We expect there to be this kind of natural progression. You're born, you live, you grow old, and then you die. Rather than you're born and then you die at 7 weeks or something. Thus, this Middle Earth droops and decays every day. Notice, he goes from talking about young men to all of us. The whole world droops. Why does it droop? It has less life. And it decays. It rots. It falls away from what it was at the beginning. And so a man cannot become wise. Notice it doesn't end there. And so a man cannot become wise. Period. No. A man cannot become wise before he has weathered his share of winters in this world. You want to be wise? You have to live a long time. What does that mean, though? That you have to live a long time. You have to endure. You must survive. How does one survive? How does one endure? A wise man must be patient. What does that mean, to be patient? Remember that first word I had over here? Gebeteth, await, long for, expect. Okay. Kind of implies that. What is the word patient related to? Or what are the meanings of the word patient? You have to wait. Okay? So it means waiting. That's one meaning. What's another meaning?
Waiting at the doctor's office.
Okay, that's waiting, but why are you at the doctor's office? Or in a hospital? People in hospitals are called patients, right? Is that just because they're waiting? No, it's because they're sick. Or suffering. So what does it mean when you tell a 5-year-old 2 weeks before Christmas, when there's a pile of presents around the tree, be patient? What are you literally saying to that little child? Suffer. You know, wait more. No, you can't touch that. That's what you're telling the kid to do. Suffer. Okay? It's related to the word passion. As in the passions, anger, love, hatred, as well as passion, as in compassion. C-O-M means with, together, what? Suffering. Compassion is suffering with somebody else, enduring with somebody else. So what is he saying? A wise man must be patient. You must endure. You must suffer it through. How? Neither too hot-hearted, nor too hasty with words. Because what's going to happen if you're too hot-hearted? Let's use another Shakespeare play. Henry IV, Part 1. Or Part 2 if you want, but Part 1 better. What's the difference, for those of you who know Henry IV, Part 1, What's the difference between Prince Hal, the future Henry V, and Harry Percy, also called Hotspur? Harry Percy does not know how to be patient in Shakespeare's play. He thinks and acts. Okay? Hal bides his time. He knows when to act and when not to act. Okay? Nor too hasty with words. What does that mean? How can you be too hasty with words?
Say something when you shouldn't.
Say something when you shouldn't.
Before you think about it.
Say something before you think about it. Like, put it in kind of an Anglo-Saxon context, making a boast. Vowing to do something. Or you could put it in a political context. Think of, we're in the middle of a presidential election. Presidential candidates do what as they are campaigning? Lie. Okay, other than lie. You're in the same political party I am. They promise. And promise, and promise, and promise, and promise, and promise. And then one of them gets elected, and what does happen? Or what happens? Wasn't a promise, it was a lie. Never intended to do X, Y, and Z. Or maybe intended to, but now that they're president, they realize, well, I can't because I won't get reelected. Okay? Nor too weak in war, nor too unwise in thoughts. That is, the wise man can't be too weak in war. In other words, there is a proper amount of strength. Nor too unwise in thoughts. Not words. Thoughts. How can you be unwise in thoughts? Because as a man thinketh, so is he. What happens to thoughts? Yeah, they get acted out. Okay? Neither fretting nor fawning, nor greedy for wealth. Fretting nor fawning. Oh, I wish so-and-so would call me. I wish so-and-so would call me. Nor fawning. Just the opposite. Being all over somebody. Looking for attention. Nor greedy for wealth. Okay, now keep in mind, what's the context of all this advice this character is saying? What is the nature of life on this middle earth? It's drooping and decaying. Okay? That's kind of the contextual background. Never eager for boasting before he truly understands. Before he truly understands what?
The implications.
Yes, very good. The implications of what he's boasting about. Okay? Look at, we're going to talk about Beowulf. Beowulf comes in, he meets the Danes, and he says, yeah, I've heard you have a problem with this Grendel monster. I'll take him on. Well, you want to hear anything about him? You want to hear about how he... No, that's okay. I'll fight him. And I'll either win or I'll die trying. Okay? He just goes in, big major boast. Other characters have boasted and died. They're unnamed because they died. Many men boasted they would kill Grendel. They became dinner for Grendel. Okay? A man must wait when he makes a boast until the brave spirit understands truly whither the thoughts of his heart will turn. That is, before you make a boast, you better be damn sure that when it comes time to pull out that sword, you don't go, yikes, because the battle seems too big. No. The wise man must realize how ghastly it will be when all the wealth of this world, what? Stands waste. The wise man, notice, must realize, if he's going to be truly wise, he must understand how horrible it will be to see that all the riches of this world are what? Nothing. As now. Now, here and there throughout this middle earth, walls stand blasted by wind, beaten by frost, the buildings crumbling. Okay. The walls and buildings crumbling are symbolic of the waste of the wealth of this world. Okay? Anglo-Saxons did not build in stone. They built in timber. They knew other people built out of stone because they lived in England. And they saw the remnants of the Roman civilization. They could go to the town of Bath and see the beautiful baths and wonder, how in the world did they do that? They could go to London and see some of the surviving Roman churches and buildings and wonder, how? They went to places like Stonehenge and thought, these things were into your work, the work of giants. Only giants could have done this. They didn't understand, kind of some basic rules of engineering and physics. You have a lever and fulcrum, and as Archimedes said, long enough lever, you can move the world. Okay? So he says, the walls and the buildings that are now crumbling, they are emblematic of what will happen to the wealth of this world. The wine halls topple. Because the Roman ruins were just that. Here are these buildings made out of 2-foot thick stone, and they still crumble. Their rulers lie deprived of all joys. Why? Because they're dead. The proud old troops all fell by the wall. Drawing a distinction between the young warriors and here the proud old troops, what are called the Dugutha. Okay? The young warriors are the Yegutha, the youth. We get our word youth from the word for young warriors. Okay? And the old warriors fell by the wall, defending, in other words, the hall. And when I read this, I always imagine, or I always picture, if I were doing a film of this, you'd have some grizzled old graybeard, okay, standing there next to a crumbling wall. The grizzled old big graybeard would be the wanderer speaking. And he looks at the wall and you see holes and stuff in it. And in a moment, he's going to make a reference to bones. And he looks down at the ground and he points with his foot and kind of throws a piece of grass by it. There's a femur. There's a rib cage. And he's looking at the futility of life. War carried off some, sent them on the way. One, a bird carried off over the high seas. He doesn't mean a single bird picked up a 200-pound man and, flapped away. He means like a raven coming and plucking at an eyeball and going away. Okay? One, the gray wolf shared with death. And one, a sad-faced man covered in an earthen grave. Probably the wanderer speaking about himself. Because he earlier said, I hid my gold frame in the earth. The creator of men thus wrecked this enclosure. God did this, he says. This enclosure, as you're talking about the world, until the old work of giants into your work, what? Stood empty. When the Anglo-Saxons came in, when the Germanic tribes invaded 449, 450, some of the remnants of Roman cities, like the city of Bath, he found unpopulated. Okay? People weren't living in some of these remains, some of these ruins. And they're like, what gives? Without the sounds of their former citizens. And the word there for sounds, it's not just sounds. It's revelry. These cities, these towns, these buildings are now silent. As opposed to what would normally happen, let's say in an Anglo-Saxon hall or in a Roman villa. There would be singing. There would be music. There would be laughter. There would be shouts of joy. There would be joke telling. And now, just the sound of the wind blowing through the empty buildings. He who deeply considers with wise thoughts this foundation, that is, this base material, this ground level material that I'm talking about, this truth, if you want, and this dark life, old in spirit, often remembers so many ancient slaughters. And he says these words, because someone who has lived a long time will have lived through slaughters, will have survived many battles. And he says, this kind of person will have to think. And this is what's called the ubi sunt motif. It's Latin for where are. It's a very famous motif you see in Latin literature. Where has the horse gone? Where's the rider? Where's the giver of gold? Right? For those of you who are into Tolkien, Tolkien does the same kind of thing, okay, in The Two Towers. And Peter Jackson, in his abomination called The Lord of the Rings, does also the same kind of thing. He has Aragorn essentially sing this. He does it in Old English. Okay, the language of the Rohirrim, by the way, is Anglo-Saxon. The Rohirrim are entirely Old English. The place that they eat, where Theoden has his great hall, is called Meduseld. Mead Hall. That's all it means. Theoden's very name, Theoden. He's called King Theoden. Theoden means king. King is what his name really means. Okay? Where are the seats of the feast? Because the benches have rotted away. Where are the joys of the hall? Okay? Oh, the bright cup. Oh, the brave warrior. Oh, the glory of princes. How the time passed away, slipped into nightfall as if it had never been. Right here. Where quam merg? That's where's the horse. Where quam mago? Where's the man? Where quam malum eva? Where is the gift giver? Where quam simbla yesetu? Where sinden celadremus? Ela bircht bune. Eala birnviga. Eala thednus thrun. Who shall throg you out? Who is able to? How the time passed away, slipped into nightfall, what? As if it had never been. The time, what time? The time of the glory of the hall. He says, it's as if it never existed. Well, if you lived in the hall, you enjoyed the pleasures of the hall, and you end up being the only one surviving, and you bury your Lord, and you go off on paths of exile all by your lonesome, then it would be like it had never existed. There still stands in the path of the dear warriors a wall wondrously high with serpentine stains. Nobody's really quite sure what the serpentine stains are. Could be blood. It's probably some kind of metalwork in the wall or some kind of stonework in the wall showing, this pattern. A storm of spears took away the warriors, bloodthirsty weapons. Weird the mighty, and storms batter these stone walls. Nobody's left to defend them. Frost falling binds up the earth. The howl of winter when blackness comes. Night shadow looms, sends down from the north harsh hailstones in hatred of men. Remember yesterday when I was talking about Ragnarok and the forces of chaos win? The weather is a force of chaos. Humanity is fighting against the weather. All is toilsome in the earthly kingdom. In other words, it might seem for the moment like you have joy, like you have happiness. But not really. All right? All is toilsome in the earthly kingdom. Why? Because the working of weird changes the world under heaven. The working of weird. What happens? Okay. What happens implies something happens. And if something happens, then there is no stasis. Right? If something happens, then change happens. If change happens, there's no permanence. That is ultimately what the wanderer is bewailing. Nothing lasts. Nothing is permanent. Listen to what he says in the next few lines. Here, in this earthly kingdom, here in this middle earth, here, wealth is fleeting. Right here. Here. Here bith fel lana. It's the word from which we get fee today. Okay? Ultimately, it's related to pig. Pig was a sign of wealth. Here, wealth is fleeting. Here is friend fleeting. Here is man fleeting. Here is kinsman fleeting. All this earth stands idle or empty, becoming or to become. That's what life on this world is. Here, wealth is fleeting, it doesn't last. Here, friends are fleeting, they don't last. Here, man is fleeting, he doesn't last. Here, woman is fleeting. All the framework of this earth will stand empty. Okay? And by the way, that word for fleeting, lana, it's the same word from which we get loan. So here, wealth is loaned. Here, friends are loaned. Here, man is loaned. Here, woman is loaned. And it's also the same word from which we get lean. In other words, not all nice and fat and juicy. You get your student loan and you feel, I got a lot of money. And then, shoop, it's gone, right? Okay? That's how fleeting it is. That's how transitory life is here. So said, we're back to that narrator. So said the wise one in his mind, sitting apart in meditation. Now, the narrator says that what this guy says, the narrator says that the speaker is wise. So the narrator must agree with what the speaker says. And then the narrator concludes for us. He is good who keeps his word. That is, who makes a boast and fulfills it. And the man who never too quickly shows the anger in his breast, unless he already knows the remedy a noble man can bravely bring about. Don't fly off at the handle unless you know you can achieve what it is you say you're going to do. It will be well for one who seeks mercy, consolation from the Father in heaven, where for us all stability stands. Now, many critics, scholars, believe those last couple lines are added later, that they are not integral to the poem. Specifically the lines, it will be well for one who seeks mercy, consolation from the Father in heaven, where for us all stability stands. And the reason they argue that is because they say it, quote-unquote, Christianizes the poem. Okay? I completely disagree. I think that element of Christianity is embedded within the very fabric of the poem. In the sense of, kind of like Ecclesiastes. All is vanity, saith the preacher. Okay? But notice what the last line is really emphasizing. And this is why, and this is especially why I think it ties in so excellently with those lines from about 90 through 111 or so. What's the last line say? You want permanence? You want stability? You want stasis? You won't find it here, but you can find it somewhere. Search for it. Seek for it. Where? God. It will be well for one who seeks mercy, not Yebedeth. Yebedeth is passive. It's just, you're like Pogo and the other guy, I can't remember the other guy's name, and waiting for Godot. You're just sitting there waiting for Godot. The only problem is, if you're familiar with Beckett's play, Godot never comes. Right? So what should they do, according to the speaker or the narrator of the Wanderer? Get up and seek. What is the Wanderer doing? He's looking. He didn't just bury his Lord, plop down on his butt and say, C'est la vie. That's life. He went out and is seeking. He's looking for a Lord. Whether or not it's the heavenly Lord is up for interpretation. Okay? All right, let's stop there, take a short break.